I've been really excited to have this chat with you because, oh my gosh, I'm a huge fan of your writing. Your writing is beautiful, and you've got this book coming out, and I just think your story is incredible. So, like, let's just dive in, darling. Let's just go in. Um,
Great, ready.
I know you're no stranger to burnout. In fact, plural. So to start us off, let's dive in. Tell me about your experience with burnout.
Well, I think it's only really sort of in the last few years that I've recognised it as that. But my whole life, I think really going back to school, I regularly got burned out, which I now recognise is because I'm wired differently. But yes, I've got a long history and a long kind of, lifetime of every few months just burning out and being totally exhausted. But not having a label for it or an understanding of what was going on. And later on down the line, I had something called autistic burnout, which is sort of recognised as a much more prolonged period of burnout, where you lose all your sort of ability, all the things that you're motivated by, you're just totally switched off by, and you have a very low tolerance for kind of any sensory input. So yes, I've had autistic burnout, which can take even longer to sort of, really recover from. It's quite a prolonged, pronounced period of total exhaustion. So yes, I've been hit hard by the burnout.
Oh, I know. And it's just, you just feel so lonely and isolated in burnout. And I don't know about you, but I constantly, every day I'd play that card of, why is everyone else managing their shit and not me? You know? So I know you worked in the fast fashion industry, didn't you, for many
I did.
years? My
Yeah.
goodness, that must have been like a little magic pot for burnout.
Totally. I mean, but it was a badge of honor. Like in the noughties, it was totally a badge of honor. It's like, fast fashion, dynamic, and a million miles an hour. And it was all about building something very quickly. We were really proud of fastness in the noughties, like to a ridiculous extent. So yeah, it is exactly as you would imagine. It's quite a chaotic environment to work in, and by its sort of very nature, a million miles an hour. And that's what it feels like on the inside, like you're running at a million miles an hour. So yeah, obviously fast fashion's gone through a lot, and we're all starting to realize that actually that's not a good thing for the planet, that mass consumption. And I don't think necessarily all businesses and employers are onto the fact that working at that pace is not good either. But yeah, lots of burnout casualties in that kind of environment. And yeah, that's hard because a lot of young people are over promoted in those environments. They're not equipped, they're not supported, and they're casualties. And just by the very nature, seen as a resource that it can just be dispensed with.
Absolutely. And just and very difficult when you're in that environment where it is a badge of honor. You're putting that pressure on yourself again, aren't you? When you're in that hot seat, you're just kind of, again, you can be sat around the boardroom table going, why am I the only one who's losing my shit? Completely unaware that everyone else is like, oh my God,
Yeah.
but I'll
And
see this.
I had the additional pressure in those environments of being a sort of undiscovered autistic woman who can't read the social cues. So in a boardroom, I don't know, I've only got experience of a couple of boardrooms, but they're quite Machiavellian environments where people are keeping their cards close to their chests, and most of the work is happening outside of that room. There's a lot of strings and things that are happening. So one of the challenges you have, sort of being autistic, is you can't read the social cues, you can't read the invisible things that are happening. So that kind of stress and anxiety that's going on internally, where you're trying to read and you're trying to second guess what's happened outside of the room, what's been brought in the room. But that creates additional kind of stress that leads to burnout, of course, because you're just exhausted from the mental load of trying to work all of that out. at a million miles an hour.
Oh, that damn mental load. And it's interesting you say you can remember being at school and kind of having moments where you'd almost burn out. And so I can't help but listen, thinking you probably adapted your life to meet your autistic needs. Like,
Yes.
did you? Okay.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of neurodivergent women do. They have to, because there's, you know, as well as it being something that we just haven't had information about, it's a sort of relatively new phenomenon in how it's spoken or understood. It wasn't thought that women could be neurodivergent, ridiculously enough. So we've had to adapt in order to survive. And a lot of that is about camouflaging and compensating to fit the gender bias, which is very malleable. And like, we, you know, we conform, we're compliant, we're social, we're able to organize life, you know, we can do. And so, you know, as well as not understanding that I was wired differently, you've also got this gender bias, haven't you? That you're supposed to know all this stuff and just make it magically happen. So yeah, I from a very early age, I was masking and adapting, and you know, that's great, but it does take up a lot of energy to do that. So yeah, burnout is and neurodivergence are kind of, you know, bedfellows.
Well, and this is what, you know, I was just, as soon as I heard you talk about in another interview about burnout being a telltale sign for you and your kind of path to diagnosis, honestly, my mouth just, I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, oh my goodness, it was just so. What was the trigger point to you kind of going down the path of your diagnosis?
So it was my child, it's my eldest child. And I think for a lot of us Gen Xers, children, or you know, just it being a much more prevalent and talked about, which we need more of. But my route in was my beautiful eldest son, and his very obvious difference, which I was very protective of from a very young age. And when autism was kind of inferred or talked about, I batted it, I ninjaed it away actually, because I was really scared of him being labelled as being different. And it took me to see how stressful it was for him at school to think and really recognise that actually I'm not being helpful in this, what I think is guarding and protecting. It's actually it's a barrier to him understanding himself and understanding why things are so challenging for him. So as soon as I'd seen that, and it was quite a jolt because it was a bit of a shock to see how overwhelming it is in this like incredibly noisy environment for him. I was able to access information quite quickly. So as soon as we started looking at it and I started to understand, what all it really is that you engage with the world differently, you communicate differently. It doesn't mean that you can't sort of adapt and fit in. I'd had all these really ridiculous, limited notions of what autism was, you know, based on it not being represented or seen in the media. So Rain Man, or the like, you know, the Scandinoirs, where there's like a woman who's demanding sex and very straight talking. Like those are the really limited representations of it. So I was frightened of it. I was scared of what it meant. But when I started looking at it and recognized it in him and restarted to have a language for him, it was quite a short hop for me to think, because it kept saying there's a genetic link, there's a genetic link. And I kept thinking, well, it's not my husband, because he clearly, like that, the autistic sort of traits that are being described. But a lot of the reading I was doing was around how it presents in males, and it not, you know, me and my son are different in different ways. So I could recognize some things, but not a lot. But once I started to make that hop to how does it present in females, it was like, okay, wow, this I totally can relate to all of this. And I didn't know I know this stuff, like, you know, it's not talked about. But I really had to dig quite deep. You know, it was only 4 or 5 years ago. to even find that information. So yeah, it was through my son, that was the link in. And since then, once we've started to look at it, we realized we're a total neurodivergent family. My husband's ADHD, and so my kids are autistic ADHD. I've got a younger son as well, he's ADHD with a sprinkling of autism, because there's co-occurrences. It's not just linear. You can have a little mix of them all going on in there.
Oh, which we both know means you have a household that has an incredible skill set. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think that's what's really interesting. Now I mean, we're going back kind of like, how old is Alfie? He's 14. So we're going back like 15, 16, 17 years ago. I used to work with children who had just received their diagnosis. So they were young, like 2 to 6. And I think terminology, you know, the stigma, oh my God, it's still there, but
yeah,
we're walking in the right direction. But that was the biggest kind of realization for me, was that, you know, the skill set is incredible, and my gosh,
totally.
we need that skill set for,
Yeah,
you know, to solve the problems in the world. Like, we're so lucky to have these
absolutely.
incredible people who have
Yeah,
this incredible skill set, because we're going to need that.
we totally are, because there's really novel ways of looking at things, just
Yeah.
like a totally different perspective. But their message from a really early age through the education system and all of society, that they're not doing it right. And so what often happens is they're concealing all of that brilliance, that richness, that like alternative thinking. And just the whole discovery has really fired me up to change that narrative, you know, for women, but for all of us, just to see it differently. You know, we're different, not difficult. So
Oh, we're different, not difficult. I love it. I
yeah,
mean, I'm just so excited for your book to come out, because I've been following you on Instagram for a while and I love your incredible messaging. I mean, you know, because there's a real paradigm, isn't there, between people who are neuro curious, like they're, you know, they may be listening to this and thinking, okay, hang on a minute, like things are resonating here. And I completely appreciate there's that curiosity, but then there's also, because there's still that stigma around it, it can feel limiting. What kind of things came up for you when you were walking down that path?
oh, so much fear, like so much fear. Like, I remember vividly when I read about how autism presents in women, like everything just slowed down. You know, that moment when you feel you have that like epiphany, like whoa, and you get really hot because you're like, oh, so it's like a collision of like fear and relief, like,
Mm.
oh, there's a thing. This is like, I'm not on my own, other people feel this. But also the sort of fear of, I don't want to have a thing. I don't want to have a thing because I want to fit. I'd spent a lifetime trying to be the same as everybody else. So it comes with a lot of like, yeah, relief and fear, just that collision of it. And I really had to battle a lot of my own sort of narrative about being wrong and that I was wrong. And it, you know, if I go out and share this difference, that, you know, it was going to be met with hostility or disbelief, or, you know, so there's a lot. And you know, finding out when you're 45, I mean, all of us as women will be late discovered in our neurodivergence, because there's just has not been access to that information. So when I write about it in my book, because writing for me is like my best form of communication. It's like everything just pours out and you're like, oh, well, that's how I feel. Because one of the things with autism is you don't always know how you feel. Like there's a thing called alexithymia, which is no words for feelings. And I think that's probably why I've been drawn into certain career paths, because sort of latter day as a professional coach, because you get to ask loads of questions and you get to be really curious. But that's been a way that I've survived and sort of fitted into this world, is by understanding human behavior and what's going on behind. So yeah, I wrote a lot about what I was feeling as I was going through all of this to make sense of it, because it's the way that I make sense of life is just by writing. So in my book, it is about really helping neuro curious or neuro sort of discovered to go through and make sense of what that means for them. So you and autism, like, you know, what is it? What's coming up? What are those raw emotions? What's the unraveling that's happening? Because you do replay your life through a new lens. And it's not like, you know, oh, when I was 5 and then when I was 6, it's not a linear sort of unraveling. It comes at you in all sorts of different ways. And you're often replaying a lot of really painful emotions, a lot of rejection that you've had, and a lot of shame that you're carrying because you didn't know why things were so difficult for you. So yeah, that I see myself in this book as a guide. It's like, I'm going to take you by the hands, and I'm going to share with you some of my insight and my lived experiences, and I'm going to give you a whole heap of tools to help you make sense of your emotions and the practical stuff, like, do I want to go any further into this? Do I need a diagnosis? How do I get a diagnosis? Because, you know, in the UK, there's a whole lot of barriers to it. I don't know how it is anywhere else, but just getting a general practitioner to take you seriously, because it's not widespread, that information. There's so much bias and limited sort of small views of what it is. And there's a lot, you know, most of the information is understood through a medical model, which is very deficit based. So, you know, a lot of people can't believe that people can lead successful lives if they're neurodivergent, because, you know, they're looking at it through this really like problem based model, you know. So, for example, you might say, oh, you've got a really rigid, sort of a narrow interest field. Actually, you've got a load of passionate humans who absolutely know what they love inside out, back to front. They know everything about it. So the difference between the medical model and the sort of neurodiversity model, which is emerging, neurodiversity is much more looking at, you know, what are the strengths of these people, and how can we embrace those and open them up and welcome them. But there's a lot that needs to happen to open the doors and really also accommodate for the needs that come with being wired differently, living in a world that's not made for you.
Oh,
So
absolutely. I'm listening to this. It's funny, isn't it? You're a coach as well, so I'm sure you've come across this as well. Like with burnout, I haven't met anyone who hasn't had to go through some kind of journey and go through their life and look at the things that they're foundational pieces. Okay.
yeah,
When we need to change, we've got to kind of, you know, look at all those foundational pieces. And I'm just listening and I'm thinking it must have been really difficult or confronting, because great that you kind of go down the road of, right, I'm curious and I want to know more about me and I'm starting to resonate. But what about the circle around you? Like, this is why your work is so important, Andrea, why we need you,
yeah,
darling, because it's lonely, I'm sure.
yeah.
And you must have faced a lot of people who, you know, there was no malice there, but they had set views on neurodiversity. So they're probably like, you're fine, you're not.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly that. And I do cover that in my book, because you get a whole set of reactions that you're not ready for. And it depends where you are in your journey as well. So, you know, like my parents' generation are terrified of labels because they might not understand exactly what they mean, or it's this new way of thinking, or another new thing that we need to get our heads around. But it's genetic. So it comes from somewhere. So often, yeah, people will either want to rescue you and make you feel like you're okay, there's nothing wrong with you, but that's their own ableism.
Yeah.
And it's not until you get further down the line in your own acceptance that you can kind of see that and be more curious about that. So they either dismiss it as there's nothing wrong with you, or they question the validity of it. You can't be autistic. You don't look autistic. It's ridiculous. Or they ridicule you in this, like, oh, you know, and there's a lot in the UK in mainstream media terrible like ableism where it's like, we can't have all these people like looking at TikTok and diagnosing themselves, because they see difference as a problem, a deficit, it's going to cost them money. So there's all that narrative, but it's no walk in the park to be neurodivergent, and to by the time you have really explored it and looked at it, you've got all the evidence you need. You've lived a life where you've been messaged with a lot of this stuff. And when you go through a diagnosis process, that's what you need to provide anyway. It's the evidence that you've got it. But it's not easy. There's so many barriers. So you wouldn't want to acquire this label unless it's something you've really lived and experienced. So yeah, there's a lot of reactions that can be difficult, and that affects how you are able to sort of accept it yourself, or the fear that comes from really delving into it deeper, because you've often been trying to fit and comply with what's normal. So when you're met with those reactions, which might be intended to be well-meaning and helpful, that can set you back, or that can make you feel a lot more shame than is necessary. But yeah, so my work is definitely, I think a lot of women are starting to rise up and join their voices and share their stories, because we need to give that representation to those who are yet to discover it, but also people to be much more welcoming and accepting that their adaptations need to be made for difference to truly belong, and for neurodivergent humans to live a good quality of life. Because burnout is, who would want that for any human, to have, for them to be in such a level of stress and anxiety that they're constantly exhausted and burns out, affecting the quality of their lives, isn't it?
It is, and when you think we're like hardwired, aren't we, to be part of a tribe, to be part of a community. It's our survival. It ensures our survival. When you think about people who've had chronic burnout and multiple burnouts, people who kind of exploring that neurodiversity path, they may kind of, you look back and you go, oh my God, I've been bloody on survival mode for how many decades? But you become so accustomed to it, and you've got all these masks that you put on. You don't realize the amount of energy you've had to use just to get out of bed and go and face the world every day.
Absolutely. Because what you're doing is you're constantly adapting, you're anticipating what's likely to come up, what's going to be thrown at me, how do I need to be, and you've got no idea really what you're going to be hit with. And then you're trying to adapt to this ongoing uncertainty and change. And then you're analysing, how did I perform? Did I do it right? Oh, I don't think I got that right. So you're in this constant cycle. And if you're not getting recovery within life, then you burn out, don't you? And it becomes more and more difficult to recover and recuperate from it.
Yeah, it takes longer. I think, I don't know about you, but I look back and think, oh my gosh, like I ended up taking a year off work and then doing my own kind of thing. But I'm like, oh, if only I just looked after myself better. It's the self-compassion piece that was missing. And I think it's missing for a lot of people with burnout. And I think this is what I love about your messaging. Like you're brilliant at flying the flag for self-compassion.
Yeah. Well, it is a really big part of acceptance for yourself. Like you have the sort of the dialogue that a lot of us have internally, which is sort of fueled externally by the whole like capitalism thing is about productivity, and the whole, it's all based, particularly as women, on free labor. Like we're just going to carry the emotional burden and we'll do all of this for free to keep this sort of fast paced efficient way that we're living. And look at us, we're all like efficient and we can just do whatever, throw more at me. If we're not able to do that, then the shame and the isolation and the marginalization that comes from that, there's something wrong with me, I can't do that, you take yourself quietly off, and the internal dialogue is like, well, there's something wrong with me, I failed, I'm not good enough. And it's sort of fueling it, isn't it? But it's being fed to us by all these like subliminal messages. So self-compassion is so important, Flic. It is like the thing that once you've accepted, you know, whatever, I think, you know, for all women, there's a part of self-acceptance. This is who I am, this is what I'm good at, I don't need to be that person. You know, we are not the same. But once you're able to understand, you know, this is what I need to function well and I need to take care of myself, it becomes a different dialogue. It's not, oh, there's something wrong with me. It's like, okay, well, if I choose to do this and I choose to contribute in this way, then this is what I need in order to do that well. So, like, I just know when I'm factoring in, you know, different things into my diary, okay, so I'm going to do a talk or I'm going to be doing this, I'll be tired after that. I need to factor that in. So it's as simple as that. But and actually learning to say no is a really big thing, isn't it?
It's fucking huge.
It's huge.
It took me so long to learn to do it.
Big thing that I've recognized and understood. I don't know if this will resonate with you, but one of our anxiety responses is fawn. So people pleasing, and it's like once you realize that that's an anxiety response that I'm having, and actually, like, this is what's causing me to burn out, this constant cycle of I just say yes because I just have to be productive all the time. So once you start to understand yourself, get to acceptance, then it just opens up these choices. And you know, it's not easy saying no, it takes a lot of courage, but that's something I've had to learn to do on the other side of understanding I'm autistic. Or saying, you know what, thanks very much for the invitation. I'd love to come along, but I'm just coming for an hour. Or I can't this, you know, but it's just owning it and knowing I don't have the energy to do that. Or, you know, if I do that, this is the cost, and I'm going to need to build in the recovery time to, yeah, to be well, to remain kind of fit and well.
Yeah, we have to really like protect and care for ourselves. When I think of you going to school with your son and kind of wanting to protect him and kind of, you know, he's amazing, he's got his incredible skill set and you guys don't understand it and I want to look after him.
Yeah.
You know, it's so innate within us to do that for our kids, but it's not within us to do it for ourselves. And I think this is where
Yeah.
it's practice. It's going to take practice, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it definitely is, but it is more of us joining our voices together and, you know, that community and that support of like, it's okay, this is actually what we need to do, and not believing there's something wrong with us. It's like it is about being well and staying well and the quality of our lives. Like, we deserve to live a life where we're not exhausted all the time.
My God, absolutely. And sharing our stories as well. That's so important. I can remember when I first burnt out, you know, I couldn't even look at a medical journal on burnout or anything like that. I couldn't bear to look at anything
Yeah.
because I was a mental health writer, any of that. I was like, no, I actually just wanted to read the stories of others, and it was hard to find them. And I'm thinking it must be the same for you, for kind of late discovered women.
Definitely. It's because it's definitely, I think, in the last couple of years, there's much more, you know, there's some amazing voices coming to the forefront. But it was really hard. And it was really hard to find relatable stuff. Like, I remember when I was first looking at it, and there was all these books about, and this is how you shower and personal hygiene, and autistic women aren't very good at fashion. And I was just like, what? Like, you know, like just this really limited, ridiculous view of it. Yeah. So I think that kind of fueled me to want to write about it as well. It's because, like, this doesn't represent me or my life, and I don't need someone to tell me these like basic kind of things. It is much more about the rawness and the realness, and that's what I want to read about. And I want to, because one of the things sort of characteristic of autism is we're not great at small talk. We go deep, and we go deep quite quickly. So yeah, I kind of wanted to pick up a book that went there, you know, that was like having that really amazing conversation with someone who's like, do you know what? And just that knowingness of like, yes, this is what it's like you say, seeing those words gives you comfort that, you know, I'm not alone, other people are going through this, and our stories might not be exactly the same, but I can relate to that bit and that bit.
when you read
Yeah.
someone's stories or hear someone will be listening to this, won't they, Andrea? And they'll be listening to you. And I know your words, your voice, your beautiful energy, it'll feel like they've taken 10 coats off because they're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, because they're feeling seen and heard for the first
Yeah.
time, long time.
Yeah. And we need that, definitely.
Oh my God, we do need that. And it's interesting because I think it's a real myth that you know, people with autism, they're not good at perceiving the feelings of others. And I think that's so wrong, isn't it?
Totally wrong.
Okay,
So
cool.
that I think, and also ADHD is very similar as well. So there's cognitive empathy and there's emotional empathy. So what can be tricky with the cognitive empathy is to look or to understand how, what someone might be thinking. But I feel how people are feeling, like I feel it. And it's what makes me great at what I do and amazing is sort of, yeah, I've worked in environments where it's about making the invisible visible through culture and values and bringing it to life. And I do that through being guided by my intuition. I'm feeling like, oh, like, and then asking the questions, just being really gently curious about it. Like, oh, I'm feeling this, or I'm sensing this. And I used to work with some of the people in my team used to be like, are you psychic? No, I'm definitely not psychic. But I could tune into the feeling. It's like, and I used to ignore that sort of source of information and not really understand it when I was younger. But as I've, accepted myself more and understood my strengths, and definitely through this whole kind of neurodivergent journey, it's the best source of like this intuition, this like emotional empathy. It's an amazing thing to feel how other people are feeling, but you do need to sort of know that's not my feeling, it's not mine, and not absorb it all. So it's kind of knowing where the boundaries need to be and understanding it's great to have this thing, but sometimes I need space from it in order to kind of decompress. But like, even things like where I live in Brighton, it's a beautiful city. It's full of like, most people on the fringes, lots of alternative thinking characters. There's a lot of homelessness and drug addiction here, and it's I can't walk past homeless people without making eye contact. Like I want them to know I see them, and people who are really struggling mentally, like talking to, it's like I see them, I can feel that, but that stays with me for quite a while. So having this wisdom and this knowledge now at nearly 50, it's like, okay, I feel that and I see that, but I don't need to absorb it, and I don't. But yeah, what we're living through right now, we're seeing it everywhere, and I feel that, I carry that feeling. So yes, it's totally false that autistic and neurodivergent people haven't got empathy. It can be experienced differently. Not everybody will have like strong emotional empathy, but there's a lot of us who do, and we feel things really strongly. And we have to take care of ourselves so that we can regulate ourselves and our emotions and know what's ours and what someone else's. But yeah, we can feel the world a lot.
Yeah, and I think it that's kind of going back to that burnout piece, isn't it? That it's
Yeah.
just really taking the action. You've got this incredible skill set and you can do amazing things in the world. I believe that workplaces are very lucky when they have people who are not, because let's face it, it's so irritating, isn't it? I mean, we kind of grew up in the the 80s and worked in the noughties and whatever, and I think only now are we starting to see workplaces recognize that different personalities, different skill sets are an asset. Where was I going with this? Sorry, I've lost track already. But
No, no worries.
I just feel it's really important that we hear from people like you who have this real kind of lived experience of coming through this journey, so we
Yeah.
can remember that we need to be looking after ourselves. Everyone should, and everyone should
Yeah.
be championing each other. It's not just because burnout, you kind of, oh, I definitely I definitely came across people going, oh, burnout, or you just need to relax. Oh, I had a little bit of that. You just need to relax for, you know,
Yeah.
or two. Oh, burnout, I'll tell you about burnout. That wasn't bloody helpful. I was in my,
No.
and I think, you know, that's why we need to champion each other. We need to learn about
Yeah.
each other because, you know, and learn about ourselves. And then we're just better for everyone, aren't we?
And the thing that I've learned recently, Flic, is that you can't just, if you're so burned out, you can't just rest. It's not like, oh, I'll just go and have a lie down.
No.
Because when your nervous system is so sort of dysregulated, you need to do things to be able to access rest. You can't just go, and it actually is not always just about rest of like sitting down and not doing anything. It's discovering other ways to rest. But I'm understanding now that to sort of calm your nervous system, it's sort of accessing ways to calm it down through your body. So it could be, you know, through your tapping, you know, your senses. And then you can start to calm your mind a little bit. But it's not, you can't, you know, if you're burned out often, when I was like burned out at work and so like, you know, genuinely physically ill, either with a virus or run down, or, you know, I've had sort of thyroid problems. You can't then just go home and switch off. Your mind is still wired and you're wanting to get back to that place really quick because the guilt you're carrying about, oh God, there's something wrong with me that I can't, you know, I'm constantly getting ill and burned out and I can't, and everybody thinks I'm flaky. I need to get back to, it's really hard to recover from burnout
It is.
because you need to access or calm your nervous system enough to be able to access the rest you need to recover.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because sometimes those environments are better the devil you know. You've spent all these decades living in them and surviving them and creating all these masks to function in them, that to not have that, to be, you know, taking time out and trying to kind of, as you say, regulate your nervous system, that can actually feel a threat in itself, can't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Take time off, rest. You must recover. You must. It's like, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, having worked in sort of some quite, I've worked with some amazing creative people, and I loved, you know, whilst I, you know, fast fashion by its very nature is quite stressful. I work with some amazingly talented creative people, and I'm really proud to have worked in those environments. But I know for workplaces to change, it can't be like a tokenistic gesture or just like a one day. It's got to be culturally embedded, and it's got to be lots of signals that come from the people that run and lead those companies that it's okay to take time to rest and it's all right to talk about our struggles, but you've got to make that okay, to stop the cycle of it happening, or for humans to be seen as resources that are just expendable and can be, you know, burned out in the corner. We'll just get another one.
I know that's the heartbreaking thing, isn't it? Oh my gosh. And I think we're so used to thinking pairing rest with like hitting a crisis point. We shouldn't
Yes,
be resting to
exactly.
bloody recover. We're
Yes,
aiming striving for balance. We're aiming for that kind of lovely flow. And I
yeah.
think it's a mistake, isn't it?
Yes, and well, it definitely is, and I think it's part of, um, if you put yourself in environments that are not aligned to your natural self, like they're going to be really difficult for you, and they probably will create additional stress. So, you know, in my work as a coach, a lot of it is about helping people to get to this self acceptance, like really embrace your strengths and the things that matter most to you, your values, and know what environments those things will be sort of readily embraced. And when you're honoring your values and you're in a place where it feels natural and psychologically safe to show up as yourself, then that really helps with sort of a lot of what might come from the exhaustion where we're funneling ourselves into these career paths or jobs that we should do, or we work really hard in areas actually which are struggles for us. Like if we think, oh, that's a perceived weakness, well, I'll just work really hard. I'll work harder and harder and harder to be really good at that. It's like, and we totally ignore the things we're amazing at, which would come with ease. you know. So we need to change that as well. So that's a big part of my drive as a writer and a neurodivergent educator, is, you know, really helping people to embrace and understand the things they're brilliant at. There's something we have with a neurodivergent brain, a spiky profile. So the things you're great at, you're really great at them. The things that you struggle with, you really struggle with them. And I think once you understand that, then you can start to embrace these things and put some things in place that will help you with these struggles. Because often it's a disparity between the strengths and the sort of needs that make us discount these things, or disbelieve that we're good at them. Yeah, so you're right. I think it is like getting your own first aid kit and knowing what you need to be well in the world. It's like, it's ongoing. It's not just when we're in crisis point or we're so exhausted that we can't function. It's part of life.
Yeah, and we need to help each other, champion each other to recognize our strengths, because it's
Yeah,
interesting. I find a lot of people who are burnt out have that very negative inner critical voice. And let's
yeah,
face it, it never came from them. It's someone else's
no,
voice. But, you know,
yeah,
whether it was an educator, whether it was a parent, a family member, but like, it was never their voice. And it always
yeah.
breaks my heart. But you know, I think we need to, well, conversations like this, they need to be had, because someone's going to be able to hear this, and then it's just that almost permission slip to start looking at your strengths.
Yeah.
Strength.
But don't you think that that's one of the right conditions for the saboteurs and the inner critics is exhaustion?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Because when we're exhausted, it's like that's when the real sort of they start to have a field day, because
Oh,
we're just not functioning as well as we could be if we were, yeah, feeling well and energized and all those things. So it's that kind of cycle that we get into. You know, you're constantly in that exhaustion place,
yeah. Oh
then
my
those inner
God.
critics are going to be having a field day with you.
Yeah, it's very easy for me to down spiral. Very easy. And as you say, like, you can feel yourself doing it. You're like, oh, I'm tiptoeing closer to it. Stop it.
Yeah,
It.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, oh gosh, the unraveling piece, I feel, is a big one, and I feel like your work and your positive messaging really helps people look at this unraveling piece, because um you know, it's brave to take these steps towards looking at those foundational pieces in your life, isn't it? And making
mm,
changes and making positive changes. But I also know there's an element of grief, there's an element of sadness when you start to look back
yeah,
and see where you weren't championing yourself and you were giving fragments of yourself away.
yeah,
And this must be something that you've kind of written about, or and you
yeah.
see in your community.
Definitely. That you're absolutely right. It Once you have that sort of dawning of like, oh my god, well, this is why some things are so difficult. Often we expect it to be like, oh, this is amazing. Now I know everything's going to be fine, but it's just the beginning. It's
Oh,
just the beginning of us really starting to delve and look deeper. So it I understand that's part of why some people are resistant to really going there, because it's frightening. It's
mm,
really frightening to looking back. So yeah, something I've written about recently is, you know, I think as coaches and as writers and living in this world, we think, okay, well, that's what I want, or this is who I am, and therefore it will become instantly. But it's not like that. Change takes time. Like, it takes us time to grow into the person that we're longing to be. Or, okay, well, and now I know I'm autistic. That's just one piece of it. But you need to then, you know, let a lot of old stuff go. You need to unlearn a lot of it and grieve for the pain that you had going through that. So it's just one discovery is just one part of it. Then there is, like, you know, the healing and the unraveling of what that was like, and grieving and the healing from it. But it's also one of the biggest things from me in all of this was I was expecting sort of like, I don't know, acceptance externally to come, like, okay, oh, you're autistic. Oh, and for sort of almost this to be this like, well, this is amazing and we accept you as you are. And it's not like that. And it is, you have to accept yourself. And that's really, I think, what a lot of the unraveling is about. And my book is called This Is Who I Am, The Autistic Woman's Creative Guide to Belonging, because that's what this really became about for me. It started off, it was about thriving. And then it's like, well, actually, it's not just about thriving. It's actually no longer having to fit and actually feeling a sense of belonging, which is something that, I've been seeking for my life. But belonging is showing up as who you are and feeling safe to do so. And there's got to be a really big internal acceptance piece that allows you to do that, because once you accept yourself, you don't have to keep trying to fit to please or to fit to conform and to be convenient for others. Once you've done that bit and you embrace all of your strengths and all of the needs you've got, and then you can really step into this place where it's safe to express yourself naturally and to belong. And part of it is actually letting go of people who won't accept you for that. Or, I have sort of quoted it in my book, the sort of old serenity prayer, which I know is about sobriety, but it's like, give me the strength to accept the things I can't change and change the things I can't accept. But that's a big part of, the unraveling and the accepting. So you might have family members who are never going to accept you for who you are. And that's okay. So you can either choose to accept that you can't change them, or change that the fact that they're not going to accept you. But it just gives you a lot more choices once you go through all of that unraveling and get to acceptance. And beyond that is genuine belonging, like not just to like a big community, but yourself. It's like, this is who I am, and it's all right to be that. I'll find my people, because once I'm in that space and I'm genuinely able to show up like that, then you just find it. It's easier, isn't it?
It is. And it's so funny when you were saying that word belonging. I've definitely chatted to other people, and what's really interesting is when you come out of burnout, is that often you haven't had yourself, you haven't belonged to yourself for so long. That takes steps as well, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, it really does. Because you've just been functioning for others. And
Yeah.
that's a lot, isn't it? To think,
Oh,
I'm just functioning for other people. Like, I'm not functioning for me. Like, it's a
yeah.
big hard thing to recognize. But once you do, doesn't mean you say no to everything, you don't do anything, but it comes with much more conditions and boundaries, and an ability to say, actually, I've got a request to make, or that won't work for me. And you belong with yourself when you're doing that. What's important and what's needed for you to live fulfilling life, not just surviving, but actually enjoying life.
I was going to say the other side of it is the joy and the thriving and the ease, because
Yes.
you've been like kind of functioning and trying to fit in different boxes and be a certain way. When as soon as you have yourself, you step the other side of that, you get that flow, that ease, and it's
Yeah.
just, and that's going to feel so good on your nervous system, isn't it?
Definitely, definitely. And it's not like suddenly it's a walk in the park. It still comes with challenges, but you're able to identify it much quicker and to say, oh, okay, or I've walked into that trap again. Oh, do you know, I've done it. But you understand why, and you can extract yourself quicker, and you can recover much quicker from it, can't you? So yeah, ease does come, and you still have to work at it. But you can correct, you can sort of get on that kind of correction path much quicker.
Yeah, I love how you said, change takes time and you're growing into yourself. That's that amazing David Bowie quote. I'm a bit of a Bowie girl. I love him.
Oh, me too.
Oh,
Behind
oh
you
my
on my wall.
gosh, I didn't see that. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I
Oh,
love him, David.
Bowie. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, we miss him still.
Yeah. Oh, totally. What's his quote? Tell me. I
Oh
love
my
a,
God,
I love.
it's the one. gosh, I hope I don't butcher this now. It's the one where he says like aging is literally growing into the person you were always meant to be.
Yes.
And I feel that's your motivation. Yes, some days are going to be difficult. Some things are going to feel confronting, but you keep taking those steps forward to belonging to yourself, to being yourself and becoming who you're meant to be. And
Yeah, exactly.
it's glorious when we're not all the bloody same.
Yes, exactly. And it is sort of, finding ways to be like, it's all right, because you feel much more solid in that, don't you? Much more kind of grounded and real, rather than all over the place for everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I cannot wait for your book to come out. I love your writing. I fell down a rabbit hole of a Saturday morning, just devouring every single one of your blogs on your website. I urge anyone to,
Oh,
I just love them. Your writing's amazing. And I think, oh my gosh, it could only be you who could write this book that we all need so
no.
much. Like, your energy is amazing, Andrea. Like, you just have this incredible way with words and this, approach. And I think it's going to be fantastic. And this has been an
Oh.
absolute treat to be able to sit with you and dive into this. For anyone listening to this and is kind of neuro curious now, are there any kind of quick tips that you can give someone that they can start to look at going down that path?
I think there's a lot more information available, sort of, there's podcasts. So one of my favorite, is it okay to mention the
Oh my
podcast?
gosh, absolutely. Yes.
So Catherine Astor has a brilliant podcast called The Late Discovered Club, and she has some amazing guests on there from all walks of life. So I think, yeah, just I would really urge you to go and check that out. And she talks to women who are late discovered in autism and ADHD. So and they will share their stories of their discovery and the change that they want to see. So I would really urge you to check that out. Plug for myself, as well as my book that's coming out in July. I'm about to launch my own Substack, which is called Belong. We are neurokin. So, as an educator, there'll be loads of my writing on there about neurodivergence, how it shows up, but a lot about sort of healing and growth. So if you want access to tools to help you with your emotions and practical stuff, there'll be loads on there. And you can access that through my website. It's probably the easiest way to go in. So yes, I'm going to be sharing more stuff on there. But yeah, it is just being really curious. And as you say, it's like a rabbit hole. Once you find that, it will lead it to somewhere else. So I would just say to anybody, just be curious as you go into it. Like, be gentle with yourself. I think by my very nature, with a sort of autism, you can see patterns, you can see things quite systemically. So I probably was quite quick to kind of jump to, okay, well, now I need answers. And I know a lot of other neurodivergent women who do that because they kind of see the sequences that need to happen in order to get from A to B. But the unraveling is quite brutal, and you can't account for or measure how much time that's going to take. So just know, be curious, and allow yourself the expansiveness of looking at it from all the different angles. But be patient with yourself, and know that when you go into it, find people who you can speak to that you feel comfortable with. But it will take time before you kind of get to a place where you feel fully accepting of it, and to find that belonging. So yeah, be curious, be patient, be loving to yourself as you go through it.
Oh, you fly the biggest flag for self-compassion. You really do. I love that. And I think anyone listening as well, I urge you to go and follow the thread on all of Andrea's work, because you know what, it's like the way you talk, that your voice, I don't know what it is. I feel like I'm being hugged. It's really
Oh,
lovely. So,
thank you.
you know,
I have had some people say that to me, like send me messages saying, "Your voice is so soothing." It's like, I don't think my husband and kids would agree with you on that,
oh,
but
there
thank
you
you.
go. There you go, love. I just feel that, you know, for anyone feeling really kind of lonely and isolated, just follow the thread on Andrea's work. You're going to feel so soothed and hugged and nurtured and seen. So it's amazing. Thank you for everything you do. It's incredible. Now, I've been asking guests at the end of conversations, quick, light hearted questions, because we all answer so differently. So on your dodgy days, Andrea, do you opt for move your body or move the remote?
Move the remote every time. Like, I love diving into all the guilty pleasures like rom-coms and family dramas, and you know, it kind of helps me to work out my emotions sometimes by watching this stuff. So always it's like, oh, actually I feel like that. I hadn't realized that's why I needed a good cry. But yes, remote every time.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Bag of almonds or bag of Maltesers?
Bag of crisps, actually.
Oh, bag of crisps. What flavour?
Well, I probably just I chips and dips. I like a tortilla with a dip. So
Oh,
yeah, they're not very exotic on the flavors necessarily, but yes, I like a good crunch.
yes, exactly. Okay. Do you ask for help or are you happy to hermit?
Hermit.
Oh,
Hello, I am really trying. So hermit is the first thing I need to do to regulate and soothe and just sort of work out. And part of the belonging is learning to share when I'm anxious or I'm feeling overwhelmed. So yeah, but first place is always the hermit to kind of work out what the feelings and what I need, and then going and asking for help.
yeah. Go to that place of calm. It's having
Yeah.
yourself, isn't it? Belonging to yourself. Absolutely. And what's the one self-compassionate thing you're going to do today for yourself?
I think it's not very exciting, but it is rest. It is like I just sleep is so important to me and it makes me feel so much better. So often Thursdays used to be my switch off. It's like, oh, it's nearly the weekend, but it's actually just need to continue with the rest. So tonight, just going to bed a little bit earlier. And yeah, then I go swimming on a Friday morning. So yeah, tomorrow will be better as a result of me having a good night's sleep tonight.
Lovely, amazing. Oh, Andrea, thank you so much for your time today. This has been an absolutely gorgeous conversation, and I just know
Oh,
come across it, we'll never know. The ripple effect will be huge. It's going to just be
oh,
cause that shift, and they're going to follow the thread on their curiosity.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for asking me. It's been a total pleasure, and it's great that you're talking about this stuff to be a place where people can tune in and know they're not alone. So I'm really delighted you've asked me. I've really loved it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, you take care. I'll put in the show notes where people can find you. Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Great.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.